D4, Acting Deputy City Manager, Mr. Wells, George Street Parkade update.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is to provide council with the reasons for the capital cost overruns and a breakdown of the additional expenses on the George Street Parkade. The report will also identify steps that administration is taking to be more transparent on the capital project expenditures and the capital project management. For over 20 years, attracting housing to the downtown is seen as a critical component of revitalizing downtown. A&T's plan was to construct a four-phase development of 160 units. Phase 1 is complete with 37 units at this time. Phase 2 is the planning is underway, Your Worship. A key component of the project was the construction of the city parkade as of the sale agreement and partnering agreement approved by council in December of 2017. The original estimated cost of the parkade was $12.6 million. In February of 2018, due to engineering concerns regarding the high ground water levels, the parkade design was changed for safety reasons. The initial design was to be similar to the city's 6th Avenue underground parkade, where temporary dewatering was used during construction, and after construction, the parkade would take on water during high groundwater events. Because of the concerns for public safety and liability risks and potential damages through hydrostatic pressure, administration and A&T decided it was prudent to install a permanent dewatering system. This permanent dewatering system keeps the waterway during construction and prevents the parkade from flooding after. In July of 2018, A&T provided the city with an updated cost estimate for the parkade based on the new design and their tender prices to build the parkade. A&T advised the city that the new estimate was $20 million and contacted the city to determine how the city wished to proceed. Administration confirmed with A&T that they wished to proceed with the parkade. In September of 2019, A&T further provided an update on the prices for the parkade based on tender prices for mechanical, electrical, fire suppression, and roof membrane. The new estimated cost to complete was $22.5 million. Project costs. The underground parkade covers approximately 2.5 acres of land. It was one of the largest concrete pours in the city. The developer's original preliminary budget was based on limited information. The pre-design was for 266 underground stalls with 68 surface stalls. The project cost for the parkade was increased due to the following reasons. The design was altered to cover the entire land area, which would maximize site coverage and increase the underground stalls to 289 and decrease the surface stalls to 662. This resulted in an increase of approximately $1.5 million. The project also encountered unforeseen items which were not typical of parkade construction. The parkade had to be built in 2 phases instead of 1 and consisted of having to relocate the private utilities and major fiber optic cable in 6th Avenue. The tanking of the foundation, including a raft slab and utilizing sheet piles instead of shotcrete. These design changes were made for safety reasons, again, to prevent the flooding. Additional dewatering of the site. In order to pour the foundation, Your Worship, they had to pump out water. They were pumping approximately 250,000 gallons of water a day for a 6-month period in 2018 and 19. Miscellaneous items included the removal of numerous additional underground foundations. We found there was foundations that we knew were on the site, but underneath those there was additional houses underneath some of those foundations. Oil tanks, upgraded overhead doors, and upgraded generator. These items increased the parkade cost by approximately $2.32 million. The other factor that arose was the U.S. tariffs on steel, an extremely busy and volatile construction market with a shortage of skilled labor, increased the construction costs that amount to an overrun of approximately $2.95 million. Your Worship, there was benefits to the parkade. The city expects the parkade and residential development to be tremendously valuable over the life of the project. For example, based on today's city portion of the tax rate and after the 10-year tax exemption has expired, the 3 phases of the developer's project, once complete, will drive approximately $36,000 in municipal taxes over a 40-year period. The development of the parkade and residential units are estimated to create 627 jobs over the life of the project. The development of the parkade allowed the city to sell vacant surface lots for development such as the Marriott Hotel site and the Hyatt Hotel site. The city investment in the parkade and the residential project were one of the key components in the investment decisions made by the developers of the Hyatt Hotel project and the student housing project. Your Worship, the student housing project, they came to Prince George 2 years prior to the Park House project commencing, and they had no interest in investing in our downtown. And as we move forward, seeing others investing, they took that risk. It is estimated that after the 10-year tax exemption, the city will receive approximately $20 million in taxes over that 50-year period from the Hyatt Hotel project and $10 million in taxes from the student housing projects. A total of about $66 million estimated out of taxes from those 3 developments, Your Worship. The new parkade also provides parking, which allows other C1 zone properties to be developed with 100% site coverage. For example, the old Rick site, there's a development proposal occurring there, a mixed-use project with commercial, office, retail, and residential. The parkade also enabled a major investment from A&T to create a new vibrancy in the downtown. And finally, Your Worship, the parkade provides a foundation and services for a new daycare, which will be built above the parkade. Construction will be commenced in the spring of 2021 through grant funding received by the city from the province. This will provide for 85 licensed daycare spaces in the downtown, another key factor in revitalizing downtown. Administration feels that the construction of a parkade and residential development has achieved Council's goal of advancing progress in the downtown. In closing, Worship, I want to provide an update on where we're at. As a result of the cost overruns on numerous city projects, administration recommended to the Standing Committee on Finance and Audit that the city manager's capital budget transfer approval be reduced to a lower of 5% of the capital budget project, or $100,000 per project. City Council approved this recommendation at the November 23rd Council meeting. The above reduction in the city manager's capital budget transfer approval creates a more transparent process wherein administration must seek Council's approval for capital project expenditures over the threshold. Further, administration is cognizant that Council is concerned with the rising cost overruns and will be assessing the current state of the capital program delivery. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wells.
In the queue, Mayor Hall, please.
Yep, thank you. Before I go to Councillor Sampson, if you could just go back probably 3 pages, you talked, and I just want to confirm that this is accurate, $36,000 over 30 years in tax. Is that 36,000?
That's 36 million, sorry, Your Worship. 36
Yeah, thank you
million.
very much.
Sorry.
Just wanted to verify that. Councillor Sampson, followed by Councillor Ramsey.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks, Mr. Wells, for presenting this report. This sucks. That's the word that comes to mind right away. Frankly, it really ticks me off to see such a massive overrun on this project. It's outstanding. It's shocking. But at the same time, we've heard it for a few months now that this was coming, that we were going to be a certain amount. So I don't want to say shocking to the fact that this is the first I've heard of it, but it's not long before this that I heard about it for the first time, which is disappointing. I'm just curious, we see that it says on the report on page, I don't know what page number, it says spending today, just after the table there, spending to date on this project is $22,452,331.47. Now, are we done spending on this project, or do we have additional monies to pay out?
Your worship, there's some outstanding invoices to come in,
Significant dollars or?
not significant, your worship.
Okay. So we shouldn't be shocked with any future numbers coming back. It won't be in the millions or even hundreds of thousands or anything. Okay. And curious on the, and I know it's not our project, but I'm hoping the answer is similar. The condo development built on top of this parkade, is it similarly over budget? Is that project experiencing similar cost overruns, or is this a anomaly on that site?
Your worship, A&T has indicated that their pre-tender prices, what they thought they were going to come in at, and when they tender them were 40% greater than they anticipated. And that's what drove the increase in price for their condos going forward. They didn't have certain things to deal with, like the amount of concrete or the dewatering or the steel that we had to deal with. So, but they were well over their initial budget, your worship, on the condo.
Thanks. I think we're going to get into capital projects as a whole later on, so I won't draw too much attention to this part, but I think part of the concern I have with this project in particular is, sorry, I can't find it on the report in front of me. I know it was 2017 at some point, but the project was approved at some point in 2017, and we're only finally realizing completion now, and I recognize it takes quite a long time to build such a massive structure, but I think one of the issues we're running into is we approve things years ago, and we only see them come to realization many years after, making the budgeting process, I mean, nearly impossible. To a degree, I can't blame some of the folks who are involved in this project on the fact that, yeah, steel in 2017 or 2016 when it was budgeted is going to cost different than in 2020 when we're finally wrapping up the project. But the fact of the matter is it's just not acceptable that we didn't have some sort of measure in place to streamline that process, to look ahead. We're not seeing projects from private industry, I think, go over quite the same as we are, so it's disappointing to see. But I just want to be clear, we're taking steps to make sure that these things don't happen again. What allowed for this project to run so far over budget without having to notify council, without having to seek approval for these overages? Was it the delegated authority that was in place for the city manager at the time?
Your worship, the city manager's capital budget transfer authority was up to $7.5 million per year for capital projects.
And so to be clear, who approved the cost overruns? It would have been the city manager of the day?
Yes, your worship.
Okay. And just one more confirmation is we've pulled back that delegated authority significantly to now, I believe last meeting we approved 5% of a total project's cost up to a maximum of $100,000. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's correct, Your Worship.
So if we were to do this project again with the delegated authority that's in place, it doesn't matter what the initial budget was, unless it was going to be 5% of it was going to be less than $100,000. There's no way that any city manager, whether it's the previous one or our current city manager, nobody would be able to spend more than $100,000 over and above the delegated authority, or over and above the budget, sorry, without notifying council and seeking approval. Is that correct?
That's right, Your Worship.
So I mean, I think last time we talked about overages was very early in the term, and it was with the bridge, and I think I said it then, and if I didn't, I meant to, I'll say it now. There's nothing we can do to say, well, we don't want to pay the $22,000 bill or $22 million bill. So yes, I'm pissed, and yes, I wish we could not, but there's nothing we can do to take it back. But we need to take the steps to make sure it doesn't happen again. I think we have made some changes since first being notified about these overages. We've changed leadership, we've changed delegated authority, we've changed a number of things, and I think that's some steps in the right direction. But I do want to get confirmation that we're in the midst of reviewing our project management strategy. Is that correct? And when can we kind of see that come to fruition?
That's correct, Your Worship. We're in the preliminary stages of looking at project management, delivery, our processes as a whole. We're going to do a comprehensive review of that, study our current practices, and compare them to best practices, implement process changes to improve efficiencies, and specifically, Your Worship, doing a lot more work at the front end of projects on the budget determination side. spending some more dollars up front to have a more accurate budget on the project, and importantly, as has already been referenced, moving on that budget more quickly out to procurement, Your Worship. And as you indicated, there's a report on the agenda a little later where you have an opportunity to look at that in a little more detail and learn more about it as well.
Great, thanks, Your Worship. I'll wrap it up there. I just want to stress that I don't want to make it seem like there's nothing we can, I feel that there's nothing we can do, oh well, let's move on to the next thing. It's not oh well, there's nothing we can do about what's happened in the past, and that's frustrating, but we can make change moving forward. And I think, I know I am, and I feel like my colleagues around the table, all of us are prepared to make those changes. We've already started the motion on some of these things, the ball rolling on some of these things, and we're going to continue to do that in partnership with the administration here. So that's all I've got for now, and I look forward to the other comments. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey, followed by Councillor Skaken.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Councillor Sampson, hit the nail on the head when he said this sucks. And I'm really glad that Mr. Wells indicated that there was an issue with transparency. There's a couple things from the timeline that are really missing for me, so I'm going to take a couple minutes to fill in some blanks. I was surprised reading this report to find out that in July of 2018, the city knew the parkade was going to cost $20 million. I was absolutely flabbergasted. In March of 2019, a report was brought forward, E11 on the March 11, 2019 agenda, and it stated that staff is recommending council approve the initial preliminary budget of construction costs in the amount of $12.6 million. That is almost an entire year after the city knew that this was going to cost $20 million. We were asked to approve a $12 million project. In September of 2019, according to this report we're seeing today, the project budget increased to $22.5 million. In November of 2019, just 2 months later, F&A received a copy of the financial report on significant capital projects, and the report showed that the project was within budget of $16 million and that there was no listed variance. That wasn't even the initial project budget. I didn't go back and think I have to verify that the initial project budget was incorrect on the report, despite the fact that technically, on a technicality, it wasn't, because it fell within the approval of the previous city manager. In June of 2020, of this year, June of 2020, all of council received the capital project update report at the June 15th meeting. And there was no mention in that entire report about the George Street Parkade. In fact, the report said, currently, the only project expected to exceed its budget is Fire Hall number 1. On a technicality, the project was omitted from the report because it only listed capital projects with MFA as a debt source. This was the same meeting we found out that the fire hall was $2 million over budget, and because of my comfort level and the comfort level of council, we decided that we needed to change the delegated authority because $2 million was too much. Note that we have had several opportunities for a disclosure that the project was going to cost $22.5 million up until this point. In August of this year, the annual report comes forward showing that the George Street Parkade is at $17.9 million, and it still isn't communicated that the expected costs for the project are around $22.5 million. There were so many times that this could have been communicated to council, and quite frankly, I'm outlining the order of events to show that there was a glaringly obvious elephant in the room. We had a transparency problem. We had a communication problem. I feel that the information provided in our reporting was misleading. That's an understatement. This process was not transparent, and it should have been. This should have never happened, and it can never happen again. That being said, we have fixed the delegated authority by reducing the limit to give more oversight to council. And I hope going forward, our capital plan budgets, amendments, and the delegated authority are more transparent. Further, I have to add a note. Just because something falls within your authority and your power and your limit doesn't mean we can't have a conversation about it. No one person should be approving $7.5 million. That is absurd. When the delegated authority came to council for review the previous time and we changed it, it was presented as a decrease. This was just 2 months after Willowcale and after the sinkhole. Why would council say, yeah, we'll increase your authority to $7.5 million? None of us anticipated that this loophole would be used for this. In fact, we were told that this would increase the frequency of reporting coming to council. It did not. This can never happen again, and I am confident that we have changed the delegated authority in a way that it can't. So I just, this is a little bit of a rant. The person I'd really like to question doesn't work for the city anymore. I think that we're taking the proper steps moving forward, and I really want to thank Mr. Babich for, working fast on the delegated authority to make sure that this won't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey. Councillor Skaken, followed by Councillor McConaughey.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and I find this appalling, and for us as a council to be kept in the dark, and I will mention there's been a leadership change, Your Worship, but we've been kept in the dark on so much of this, and then when we're kept in the dark, the public's kept in the dark, and we find out the same thing, the same time on a number of these issues that the public does when the agenda is published. Like, how the hell are we going to do our jobs of oversight if we can't get the correct information and timely information? And I look at it. You dig a hole, 250,000 gallons of water a day coming out of a known floodplain when this starts, and we have to spend all this money to correct it. When they talk in the report about the developer having limited information at the beginning, and I find it astounding. But not only did we not have a bunch of information, I guess my question to administration, and maybe to build on what Councillor Ramsey talked about, was the delegation of authority. And I'm wondering, it looks like in the report, in July 2018, the city committed to the developer that the project was going to go up to $20 million. And at that time, my understanding was the authority of the city manager under the delegation of authority bylaw was $1 million. We changed it to $7 million something for the overall capital projects, but that was done, I believe, in 2019 through F&A, to the Sustainable Finance Guidelines, and then council voted on it. So my question is, and there's some other holes, Your Worship, in the report, and I think what I'm going to do is make a motion after to get some more clarification. We talk about almost $3 million in costs on tariffs, steel, labor shortages. That's not clear to me. I want a breakdown on that. But I also want a breakdown on the delegation of authority and how the developer could have been committed and told that the city was going to give them $20 million when council didn't know about it. It's shocking. So I want a history, and people in this community want a history and some timelines and steps on how things unfolded. And I realize, Your Worship, going forward, things are going to change. They have to change. There's been a lack of accountability over the years, and I think that is definitely changing. But, we're going through COVID, we're going through all these other crises. We have the Willowcale Bridge, we have this. We have literally tens of millions of dollars in cost overruns, and the taxpayers have to pay for these mistakes. So I'll get back in the queue after, Your Worship. It's just, and it bothers me that I had to make a motion in September to get this information to council. And I'll ask administration, when would we have gotten this, this information? Would it have been a line item in the budget? I'm just wondering if I could put that out there, Your Worship.
It would have came back in much the same way that the additional expenses in 2019 came back. It would have came back in the annual report. But yes, you're right, probably just as a one line item. It would have been treated the same.
Okay, so that in itself is concerning. We have had a change in administration, but you know, I also think, Your Worship, that there's a lot of work to be done by the, you know, the senior team going forward. I mean, just the fact that the transparency and the information council gets, I think is just, it's underwhelming to say the least. And it makes it tough for me to defend my decisions and my votes on council when, I mean, I just get blindsided. So I'll let some of my other council colleagues, you know, speak to this, Your Worship. And again, you know, I'm being tough on administration, and I would be tougher on administration if, you know, we hadn't made some of these changes with personnel and other things. And I know, you know, it takes time to move things along, but my God, this is just, it's embarrassing, Your Worship. So thank you.
Councillor McConaughey, followed by Councillor Kraus.
Thanks, Mayor Hall. Wow. This really blew up fast. At the outset, the combination of COVID and the overruns in itself has been just egregious. But then to listen to Councillor Ramsey's timeline, it makes a lot of pieces fall into place on why there is, you know, a feeling of confusion and a feeling that you're just not getting all the information that we need, regardless of how many times one or my colleagues or I, any number of us at any given number of times, emphasize the need for better reporting for our capital projects, that the information needs to be shared, because then those the burden and the decision making, and you know, Councillor Ramsey nailed it when we, or I believe it was Councillor Ramsey, when we increased the delegated authority just not that long ago. The spirit and the intent was never to just shoot up one project and cover and use delegated authority to cover in one shot. Now, I got to be careful because I don't know for that for a fact. Of course, this is pretty freaking tragic and it's very egregious, and it's unfortunate because this is on top of an issue with this one project where, once again, a big part of the blame is apparently caused on what is underground. Like, we don't know what is underground. I don't understand what the geotech report in advance. Willowkill Fire Hall, Whittick Park doubled in cost, and here we go. I don't understand either we need to use a different company or we're falling short in our terms of reference and on the work that we require. We're taking the $4.99 basic model in, I don't know, 5 easy payments as opposed to the $10K investment right at the outset that will save us millions of dollars in the end to determine that the site suitability even before the plans are drawn. And I mean, none of us sitting around the table are experts on capital projects and commercial and construction, and I know I'm not. And it seems like we don't have enough staff that do either, and I feel queasy about referencing staff, but you know what, guys? There's lots of room under this bus here right beside me. And I think it's not even about blame anymore. We've all talked about the changes and the progress that is in store and moving forward, so that we are talk about losing trust of citizens. That's an understatement at this point. And even peer communities are shaking their heads. So I think, as opposed to looking behind us, perhaps we need to definitely be more proactive at the outset. And I know that there's talk about reassessing our internal, how we go about it with our construction and process and capital projects. But I think it's really important that there needs to be an outside consult, in my opinion, like an RFP for a consultant report. Somebody on the outside that examines like the current practices of the city of Prince George in general, but then looks at best practices specifically, and that's for the entire construction process. From project investigations to plans to budgets to contracts to like every single step. And so I have a question, Mr. Babich. Is that something that is already planned, or does that need a motion for direction? And can we all be assured that this is something that is going to take place? And the second part, if I may, in my opinion, I think that we need to have a moratorium on any building project until this consultation report is back to council. Just comments to Mr. Babich, if I may, please.
Certainly, Your Worship. So yes, we are proceeding with a capital project management process review. We haven't made a determination in regard to retaining an external consultant and what the scope of that work would be, but we do envision seeking some external assistance in regard to that process. We can report back to council on what those plans are in the new year. In regard to existing capital projects, council received, or Finance and Audit received earlier today, a draft of the capital budget moving forward, and administration has worked to reduce the number of projects on that plan. There are some that are essential, and there are many that are in process. So in regard to putting a moratorium or a freeze on that, I'm not sure that that's responsible at the moment for the municipality, but be assured that we have taken steps to reduce the number of capital projects with a view to minimizing the budget impact on that moving forward for next year, Your Worship.
Thank you very much to Mr. Babich. I hear those words, and I agree. If that's what went forward with at FNA this afternoon, my apologies, I missed it, and then we're in good hands if that's the direction that was decided. So that's great. And so it's good to hear that we are getting this looked at. Sometimes things are just way above our scope, and we need to look at how other municipalities are doing that, including the entire process, as I say. And I think it definitely needs to be an outside body, in my opinion. It can't be done from within. Anyway, that's all I got. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McConaughey. Councillor Kraus, followed by Councillor Frizzell.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I think it's all been said. I don't know how I could add anything. Of course, this is not acceptable. And but I'm confident that we are taking steps to remedy the problem. It's going to be a lot of hard slugging to get there, I think. And I think staff are already underway on that, and I thank them for that. And we know from some of the things that are already in place that we are already on the move to remedy this situation. So I just want to say thank you for the report. I don't know what else to say because I don't know when we would have heard. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kraus. Councillor Frizzell.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. It's reassuring listening around the table and online that there are no bucks being passed. It's pretty clear that the buck stops here. That's why it's so frustrating. I'm thinking as I was describing this to a colleague, he said, well, that reminds me of going to get my brakes fixed on my car. And when I came out, there was a bill for $3,000 because they had done the brakes and they'd done the head gasket as well. And fact was, it was a car that he never would have approved those for. And he didn't give consent for those additional repairs. maybe it's true that he needed all of those additional repairs for safety, for just being able to drive the car at all. But the frustration of not being consulted over the repairs of his car, over the work being done without his consent and then being presented with the bill. Yeah, maybe he needed that. Maybe all of that work needed to be done, but it wasn't done in the light of day. And what does it speak to? It's about, well, Councillor Ramsey talked about transparency and communication, absolutely, but it's trust in the end. You never trust that garage again, that where you got that work done, and you go to another garage. Now there's a process of rebuilding that trust, and with every indication, it's so much better already. We're getting previews, we're getting discussion, we're getting reviews of what's been done and what's anticipated that needs to be done. In the end, this is our car, we're gonna drive it, we're gonna pay for those bills, but we're doing it on behalf of everybody. It grates, and that trust, having been once undermined, isn't just undermined for us around the table, it's for the city. There's a lot of work to be done here. This is just the start of rebuilding that trust. And every indication is solid and positive, but there's a lot of work to be done. Thank you, Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Councillor Skaken.
Well, thank you, Worship. Just a question I forgot to chime in on. All the work and the sewer and water connections that were done, and I don't know how many times Patricia was dug up, were those costs included in what we're paying for the parkade, Your Worship, to administration?
Those works were done under a separate capital budget called the Downtown Utilities Relocate. And there was a sewer portion, a sewer funded portion and a water funded portion. And so those costs would have been under those separate projects.
Do we know what those costs are? Because what I'm getting at, Your Worship, and I'm going to put a motion on the floor to just clarify some of the timelines and the total cost, but if you don't know now, because my concern, Your Worship, is the original budget, 12-something million dollars, there's no way I would have voted on, any increase. It will be more than 22.5 million. We just don't know how much more, right? So I'll get that information, Your Worship. So what I'm going to do is put a motion on the floor. I kind of, before the meeting, I mentioned to Mr. Wells what I'm kind of looking at. So, and we can massage it, but what it is, a lot of good things going forward, a lot of changes. But I also think we need to know the timelines, when council was informed, when the developer was exactly informed that the city committed $20 million to, because Councillor Ramsey laid it out quite well, and the delegation of authority, when was that changed? 2019, yeah, and May 2019, yet the commitment was made prior to that. So I think, from my perspective and many people in the community, they want some answers on that, Your Worship. So I'm going to put a motion on the floor that we, administration, provide a breakdown and timelines, including budget increases, the changes to the delegation of authority, and any reports that came to council. That's what I'm kind of looking at, Your Worships, and any other costs. And I think if I have to refine it, I will, but I'm just wondering if Mr. Babbage and Mr. Wells kind of, if they capture what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for, the report that deals with a lot of breakdowns in costs. One concern I have is the almost $3 million for labor costs, tariffs, and things like that. I'm not sure about that. I wouldn't mind some information on that, but I'm just wondering, what would that take to get that information back to council? Because really, we have all the information, when the delegation and when the commitments were made, things like that. So I put it out there, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got a seconder who's Councillor Sampson, Ms. Conley, and Councillor Sampson, the motion.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks for the motion, Councillor Skaken. I have to say, commenting broadly on that, there is, when Councillor Ramsey lays out the timeline, there's some pieces there that maybe I didn't quite pick up on prior, and it is concerning. I believe it was May 2019 that we approved the changes to the delegation authority through the Sustainable Finance Guidelines. that was presented in a way that would provide greater oversight. I actually went back recently and watched that meeting again, and saw the way it was presented, saw the way it's been used, or was used, I should say, and vastly different, the two. And so that's really concerning, hearing the timeline, and getting that information back and confirming it would be helpful, I think, through Councillor Skaken's motion, because if the project was committed to prior to that delegation of authority, how is that possible? How do we approve something, or how was it approved by a member of administration prior to having the authority of approving those kind of dollar figures above and beyond what was approved by council in something 2017, summer 2017, when this project was originally approved? So, yeah, the timeline really is what did it for me to want to support this motion and see how this breaks down, because that's unsettling. I would never, ever have voted in favor of that sustainable finance guideline amendment if A, I thought it was going to lead to being used not how it was presented, and B, if I thought that it was already committed to in the form of $10 million for our parkade. So I'm looking forward to this motion. I'll vote in favor of it. I think getting the timeline back and seeing how this plays out. I'm not sure what it will do for how we can do change. I spoke earlier, looking back, saying this sucks and it's not good. You can't change what's already taken place, but you can make changes going forward about how we do things. We can learn from things that have happened. And although I don't know exactly what's going to come out of this, looking back, maybe we can learn a lesson or two going forward, and as we go down the process of administration change that we're currently in, maybe this will provide some insight to how we continue down that path. To not that I believe our acting CAO or our future city manager is going to lead us astray, but it's going to give us maybe some guidance on how to ensure that council's set up for success on that. So look forward to supporting this motion. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Scott, followed by Councillor Kraus.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am wholly in favor of this motion. I think it's about time that our level, as Councillor Frizzell said, our level of trust needs to be rebuilt. And information is a great way forward, as well as transparency. And I'm completely in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kraus, followed by Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you, Worship, and I guess along those lines of what Councillor Scott just raised, I guess I was wondering what we would garner from it. We already know a lot of things have happened that probably shouldn't have happened, and I was just wondering what would we get from it. If it's to create a level of trust, certainly. If it's to create change, certainly. I will be supporting it, but I guess I'm just, at the end of the day, if we're going to do something with it, that has merit. If we don't, then I'm not so sure. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Hall?
Yep, Councillor Ramsey, followed by Councillor Frizzell, and Councillor McConaughey, you're in the queue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hall.
How about Everett?
Sorry, he had, so Councillor Ramsey, Councillor Everett, Frizzell, McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. Similar to Councillor Kraus's thought about, doing something with this, I'm in support of it. I would like to see us do something with it. Perhaps looking at an evaluation of the whole process and providing some learnings for future, I think would be beneficial. But further to that, I think something to note is that this project was approved in summer of 2017 outside of the regular capital project planning. And so I think that perhaps we should also evaluate that process. Look at, is this something that should be happening? Is it appropriate for us to be approving things outside of the capital planning process? Things do come up from time to time. So, I think that it's important that we have that ability, but when those things do come up, I spent my entire weekend rereading every report about the George Street Parkade. Ask me anything you want to know about it, and I have them all bookmarked. But it was challenging to find that information. I know, we have made changes to amendments to the capital plan. They're now listed on the website. It's a great change, but I think it should have happened sooner because we would have been able to see this and I wouldn't have to go do so much digging. But anyway, point is, looking at that process for capital projects being approved outside of the regular budget cycle, I think that's something that we need to look at just for future reference and make sure we learn something from this and that this doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey. Councillor Everett, Ms. Conley, can you put Councillor Everett in, and then I'll go to Councillor Frizzell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Am I on?
No, we can hardly hear you, Councillor Everett.
How about now?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
So, everything's been said around this issue, and I think Councillor Skaken's motion will give us some more material to evaluate, and hopefully there's some things out of that help us go forward. Has been said a number of times by various councillors, it doesn't change where we are, and we can't get around this as council. We have to take some responsibility in that transparency that we looked for and didn't get. We could have maybe stepped up more to it as soon as we learned some things, but it's impossible to learn things if you don't know that they're happening in front of you. And as Councillor Ramsey has laid out very clearly to us, she had to do a lot of research to find out where each movement happened along the way. And we put things in place now that will take care of those, hopefully on a go-forward basis. But there's some things that we can learn if we just take a closer examination of this, because we're going to have more projects where things get out of line, but as long as we know about them and we can talk about them and look at maybe we can change the project, we'll be in a better place as a city.
Thank you, Councillor Everett. Councillor Frizzell, if you hit your green button.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. And question through to Councillor Skaken just on the amount of, I wanted to get a sense of how thorough and rigorous you want the analysis to be and what timeline to get it back, if you want to wait until the project is complete or to begin now. But I'll preface it by saying that this is a solid way to come down on this. I know that in the past, Councillor Everett, yourself, a number of people around council, we've kicked around the idea of putting forward a municipal auditor general here at the city or at doing audits, those kinds of processes. But we've only delved minimally into this for this one-off. Your solution is a good one to go more deeply into. Just wanted to get a sense of what timeline.
Oh, if I may, Your Worship, the timeline I don't think is so important. I mean, Christmas is coming up. We got things going on in the new year. It's behind us now, but you know, I think if we can get it January, February, whatever. And I'm not looking for a whole lot of detail. As I mentioned in the original motion, I wanted to know what the city's wages were worth contributing to the project. They're going to talk about the added cost of the sewer and water upgrades. And I also wanted a little bit more clarification around the almost $3 million in costs with the steel tariffs and increased labor costs. I think that's important. And then a timeline of when we knew, what we knew, and the delegation of authority in that. So I don't think it's going to be complex. The information is there. It's just a matter of administration, you know, sitting down with whoever it is for a few hours and pulling stuff together. So the timeline isn't as important as administration doing it and bringing it back to a public meeting.
Okay, bravo. Let's do this. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor McConaughey.
Thanks, Mayor Hall, and Councillor Skaken just answered my question. I support the motion. I think when Councillor Krause said what is the purpose, I think exactly what my colleagues have said, so that this never happens again, so that we turn this into a learning opportunity. And let's face it, people elected us to provide oversight, and that didn't happen, and there has to be accountability. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Everett, I've got you back in.
I'm good, Your Worship.
Okay. I don't have anybody else in the queue. The recommendation is on the floor. I'll certainly support the recommendation. I think it gives us clear direction. Councillor Skaken, thank you, Councillor Sampson, for seconding that. I think the direction that we needed is built into that recommendation. I think that what we're seeing this evening is a good discussion about a project that has huge impact in our community, quite frankly, but it has a huge impact on our community and us around the table in a different way as well. We do have in a bit capital project updates, so I just want to tie a couple things into that as I talk about capital projects overall, and I'll do that when we get to the capital project update. So we have the recommendation. All those in favor in the room? All those in favor on the phone?
In favor.
Those opposed? That's carried unanimously on the recommendation from Councillor Skaken. At D4, George Street Parkade, we have a recommendation to receive for information. Councillor Scott, Councillor Kraus, all those in favor of the recommendation in the room? All those in favor of recommendation on the phone?
In favor.
Those opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you.